they're all based on the same set of values. And the same set of values is a wheel of six, if you will, but they all have to do with relationships, all have to do with community, all have to do with respect, all have to do with giving back. None of those key values have anything to do with, what's our maximum revenue, what's our rate of profitability, what's our return on sales, et cetera. It's all has to do with behavior and how we treat the people that we're serving. So whether we're serving guests here at Mountain Sky or at West Creek, or whether we're serving customers in our PGA business, or whether we're serving fans in our Atlanta Falcons or Atlanta United in our stadium, which has been voted #1 stadium in the country the last 2 years, little plug. But everything we do is all about service to others. So, we know if we do the right things for the right reasons in terms of the tactical decisions, but if we have this welcoming home, this welcoming feeling where we're more concerned about who we're serving than about ourselves, that comes across with a sense of trust and caring. So an example would be, just to demonstrate that, in the National Football League, 32 teams, the last 2 years, the Atlanta Falcons were voted #1 in the NFL for fan experience. Major League Soccer, we're at 24 teams. We were ranked #1 in Major League Soccer in terms of fan experience. But a lot of it has to do with a lot of different things in food and beverage and our unique strategy in that regard, but in the setting in the stadium. But beyond that, it has to do with the fact that every single person in any of these venues that we're talking about feels like they're an honored guest, feels like they are, the reason we're there is to serve them. And I would say to you, our associates are compensated well. But having said that, their greatest compensation, in my view, is that, they're seeing people smile every day. They're making people's dreams come true. They're making people's problems go away, the sense of community, all of these things that we share and talk about. They love all that. So our associates feel like, I may have a tough day at home or a tough day maybe when they come into work though, and they're confusing work with play, and they're making the opportunity to serve right there is very powerful in terms of enriching their own experience. So that's a key driver in everything that we do. We also feel strongly in community and giving back, and we do that with the service in the businesses themselves, but we do it in a broader sense in terms of our own philanthropy, our family foundations. $400 million since 1995, and that'll probably double and triple in the next 10 years. And then each of our businesses has an associate-led fund of themselves, which is very, very significant in dollars. But the beauty of that is that these are not trained philanthropists. They're just associates. They're not executives necessarily. They're trained, to how to go through evaluations, et cetera. They make the decisions. They're closest to the people they're serving. They understand the communities they're living in. They understand their industries incredibly well. And so they make decisions about, how much we're going to allocate in certain areas, and they do that work, and we support them. We don't guide them. We just, we give them X amount of dollars and they take care of it. The beauty of that is that the associates feel a tremendous sense of pride then, not just in their work, quote unquote, which is having purpose in terms of serving others, but also they're physically part of going out and doing site visits in a variety of settings and making decisions about, we've been blessed here, and how do we help others? How do we do this work and expand it? So to have that pride, that gives the associates even more purpose and more sense of that. And I've publicly said, from my standpoint, look, whatever's left over, 98% of my estate is going to be going back through philanthropy, family foundation, my kids' foundations, these associate-led foundations, because I don't need any more clothing. I don't need any more of anything. I need more, growth myself, but I want to see, the world a better place than it is currently today, and be part of that. And our associates feel that way. So the upside down pyramid, if you will, with guests, customers, fans on top and me on the bottom, reinforces the message that the people that are most important are the people that we're serving. It's not, it's not a bunch of words. We embody that. We tell stories around that, et cetera. And then we have our frontline associates who are the next ones that are touching and feeling all of our guests or our fans, customers. And then, it's my job and other associates at the leadership level to provide the environment to make sure they have the resources, to make sure they have the strategy, to make sure that we create goals for them that are reasonable, et cetera, and give them support. So, and your question, which is probably the best question that as a business person you ask, is that, often an entrepreneur has a vision and it's successful, but once they try to expand it, it becomes not successful. So, at Home Depot, we struggled with that as well. When we had 4 stores, I remember meeting with a gentleman from Goldman Sachs, who was the most highly regarded banker on Wall Street in the retail space, and he sat down with me at lunch. He said, "Well, you have these 4 stores, in Atlanta, very successful, and you have a unique culture. But he didn't ask me a question. I was only 37, so I was like, woo, meeting with this guy was a really big deal." So he said, as you expand, you're not going to be able to maintain this culture. You're just not going to be able to do it. He said, because you guys are so physically involved in the level of training, the level of commitment, the level of their associates understanding your viewpoints and all this. So it was troubling coming from here, because we had aspirations to become a national company, which obviously with 2,200 stores now and stores in Mexico, Canada, and U.S., it's amazing story. But the key to that was not what's on a piece of paper, not the 6 core values that we live. It was not really the inverted triangle, but it's the ability to make sure that what we would term, in case of Home Depot, was an orange apron, so it was orange, a lot of orange in our business, that our associates, bled orange, if you will. And what that means is that they understood the values. We didn't make them write them down. We didn't make them, they don't have to say them exactly in this order, but did they live them? Could they articulate them in whatever words they wanted to, but most importantly, could they live them? And so we became very paranoid about succession planning, making sure that when people got promoted, that the first question was not, are they technically really good at what they're doing, whether it be in a store or a store support center. Even our headquarters, if you will, we always call them store support centers because they were there to support the stores that were supporting our customers. But the key was, do they understand it? And so understand our value set, and do they live it? If they live it, they had a chance to move ahead, become a store manager, become a district manager, whatever it may be. If they didn't, it didn't mean they were a bad person, but we put them in another area where their ability to affect large numbers of people was not going to be as great. So that ability to understand and live our values and become a role model and lead by example is one of our core values, lead by example. So you saw last night that I served pie. So, this is maybe off the subject a little bit, but the example is it's important. It's not just important. I do it at Mountain Sky as well. Our guest ranch open to the public because, I want the guests to really see me in a position of service to others. I want our associates to see that. It's not just a bunch of words. It's actually leading by example. There's nothing that I wouldn't do to help. Last year at Mountain Sky, I was sitting in the bar area and having a drink, and I heard somebody say, "Well, our bathroom is not working, and it's over there." I said, "Yeah." So I went and I fixed it myself, and there was another one that wasn't working. And I fixed it myself. So I came back. I just that's kind of my nature. It's not working. Go fix it. It's not a matter of title of who I am. I didn't ask anybody else to do it. I did it myself. So the associates the next day, I had a couple say to me, "We heard that you actually were fixing toilets yesterday." I said, "Well, yeah, it wasn't, it's part of what we do is that we have to lead by example." And those storytelling, those examples, and picking the right people behind that understand those things and live those things are the way you expand an organization over a broader scale. If you have really bright people, they don't get what you're doing, they don't get your purpose and your vision, then it's not going to work. Doesn't mean they're not bright, doesn't mean they're not good, doesn't mean they don't have a different purpose in life, but they're not going to be able to support your organization. Yeah. So, much of what you're doing and expanding it so incredibly in the last 3 years, you have to have the right people around you, people who understand Jay Shetty, people who understand your value set. They can have their own, but it has to be, in a certain sense, has to have sense of service and sense of purpose deeply ingrained as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much. That was a beautiful answer, by the way. And amazing to hear that you were fixing toilets, and definitely saw you serve pie yesterday.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's I think it's amazing. And I've definitely felt that with you personally this week, just how personal you are with everyone and how much you make sure and check in with everyone and making sure we're all okay, which has really been beautiful and very, very amazing to see that as well. And that answer was amazing because for me, that is what defines leadership. When I meet someone, I'm most endeared by their humility and by their character more than how much money they've made or how successful they are. And I think that's all of us. We remember people based on how they make us feel, as opposed to what they have or what they say. And I think the fact that you've been able to do that in an organization, tell me about a time, Arthur, where actually you may have made a mistake or a failure in the organization, and I'm sure there were many, but any that stand out to you where you really learned an important lesson that stayed with you, that made you change something.
I hope there weren't too many, but there were some. I'll give you an example, and this was one at Home Depot as an example. The only acquisition we made when I was there and Bernie was there was a group of 9 stores that were in our industry. They had stores in Dallas and elsewhere in Louisiana and Mobile and Baton Rouge, et cetera. And so we acquired the stores, and then what our decision was that we didn't want to lose the volume that they had. It was a fraction of the volume that we had, but we didn't want to lose the volume. We were very paranoid about losing volume, focused always on revenue. And so we decided to keep them open and change the stores. So it really was kind of like changing tires on a car that's going, even 30 miles an hour. It gets very ugly, very difficult to do, et cetera, et cetera. So when we reopened the stores, we realized we had, physically, we had changed the stores. They looked like traditional Home Depot stores, great stores. But the associates didn't really get us because we hadn't really put them through the kind of training and exposure and understanding that was critical to all of our associates. So there was a separation there from, our value set, which drives everything, to the people that were serving the customers who, were well-intended, but they didn't understand our priorities. They understood the traditional priorities, which was not as rigorous about customer service as ours was. So we ended up closing those stores for a short while and, putting everything on pause, taking all the associates, training them, doing everything we had to do, et cetera, et cetera. When they reopened as our Home Depot store. So I think that was an example of where we got a little ahead of ourselves. And probably, forgot to check certain boxes that we needed to check. Another example, and both in our PGA business today is a good example. We're expanding at about 1 million square feet in golf retail in the next 5 years, which is, there's nobody in golf retail expanding anywhere. And people you talk to say, but it's been extraordinarily successful. But the point is that those stores require a high level of service and people understanding the industry, club fitting, ball fitting, et cetera, and relationships to customers, et cetera. So to our guests in the store. So, we take a lot of time now in moving a large group of people to the new store to make sure that we don't make that mistake again. So those number of people can train the additional 40, 50, 60 people that we're hiring and making sure that they get our culture. So, culture really drives everything that we do. I mean, everything we do, those value sets, they drive everything that we do. And, the body can only absorb change at a certain rate and pace at a certain rate. So I think it's important to be able to acknowledge that and make sure that, whatever your culture is, it doesn't get diluted as you expand. More often than not, it does happen. I've had some experiences, and one other example of that, when we went at Home Depot, when we started to expand into the Middle West, we went to Detroit with a group of stores, and we realized then we were opening up stores. We had a store every day and a half, and that we couldn't really sustain that rate of growth. So we went to the board, Bernie and I, and we said, look, we've decided we're going to maintain a growth rate of no more than 25% a year. It had nothing to do with financial modeling and everything. It had to do with how many associates could we impact, hire, impact, train, making sure they understood our orientation, became Home Depot fanatics, blood orange, all those things we asked them to do. We said that's the most that we can possibly do. So we kept our growth down to a point that we can still produce the kind of success and deliver the kind of experiences in all of our businesses.
Yeah.
Same thing happens out here at the ranch, is that we've made some adjustments over the years. We do it very slowly, very modestly, because we don't want the experience to change, and we want to make sure that everybody's ready for the change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's amazing advice for all of us. Anyone who's listening or watching right now and is growing a small team into a larger one, an entrepreneur that's expanding their business.
Right.
Culture is that thing that's
Right.
going to make sure that you succeed in the long run.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to hire fast and hire quickly.
Right.
And I know Alex and I, and with the businesses that I work with right now, we're actually some of the slowest hiring people in the world.
Well,
and
it's terribly important. I mean, I had a CEO of a major competitor of ours meet with me once. I was actually playing golf over at Augusta as a guest, and he was there. And he said to me, well, if you're here around lunchtime, I'm out on the putting green, and, come over, say hi. And I knew him. So I did. So, and he had left the company at that point. And he said, we probably visited 200 of your stores a year. And at that point in time, we had stores in Chile as well. He said, and we could copy everything. We could copy the size, the pricing, the assortment, the signing, everything. He said, we'd go around and ask people, this culture thing, value thing, and no matter where we went, no matter who we spoke to, they all said the same thing in their own words, but they all were doing the same thing. And we were not able to do that in our company.
Wow.
And but that's because, we recognized the importance in that. It was not a new message every single day. It was the same messages over and over and over and over again, to the point people said, oh boy, here we go again. We're gonna listen to customer service. And every example that we could find of great customer service, we celebrated that. We had issues with, that we had to struggle with as well as a company, but we celebrated the successes, and particularly there weren't successes in how many stores we opened up. The fact that our earnings per share grew at 49% a year for 23 years, our stock grew that quickly. We didn't talk about the stock market and how wealthy we're making people, though we had a lot of pride in that, because then we gave other people the financial capacity to make a difference in their own lives and have a financial purpose in their lives and taking care of their family, extended family, community, giving back. But so it's a beautiful model, because it's one where associates and who you're serving all appreciate the investment you've made in doing the right things for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like you said earlier, the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation has given $400 million since 1995
Right.
to so many incredible ventures, and many of them have been in the space of childhood development,
Right.
education and the arts, and parks and green space. And I wanted to know why you specifically selected each of those three.
Mm-hmm.
They're so beautiful in their own right, but I'd love to know from your own perspective as to why you believe those three areas are so important.
Well, I think, anything, and it doesn't have to be in Montana, obviously, because most people don't live here, but, anything connected to green space, to parks, to nature, to getting outside, to finding that solitude, that quietness, that place where you can reflect, and a place where you can, go with family and friends and experience things that aren't driven by, on my phone every 3.5 minutes or less. So I think that, that's an area that we've always felt very, very strongly about. Obviously, we're involved in conservation here in Montana as well, and elsewhere in the West. So it's not just these two ranches, which we think are models in terms of ranches should operate, not just from a guest standpoint, but from, in terms of the actual ag process that we have going on. So we've always felt strongly about that, being outside, being connected to nature, being connected to people that you're outside with. It opens up a different perspective on viewing the world and viewing each other, and having that sense of community. A sense of community is so important. I was raised in an apartment house, and as well the rest of my family. But what's interesting is that in those apartment houses, when it was during the summer when it was warm, or even in the fall and spring, it was in New York City. People would bring their little chairs downstairs, and everybody would sit like outside the apartment, because they had that, that need, desire for connection to others. And I think that's true whether you're living in an apartment or whether you're living in a home or whether you're living. So we, at our ranches, we don't promote the use of technology. Sorry, Jay. Apologize for that. But I mean, there are places where people can use technology because of conferences and other work, but we don't actively promote it. We want people to get outside. We want people to experience nature. We want people to touch and feel things, and that silence and that solitude and that, finding that quietness within themselves, that inner calm, which they can do so beautifully in nature. Public education has always been a big issue for me. I went through public school my whole life. Didn't go to private school until I went to college. I went to small business school, Babson College out of Boston. And so I feel like, the more that we can do in terms of public education at a higher level, creates, really unlocks minds of all of our young people, that exposure. Thomas Friedman was right many years ago when he wrote his book, The World is Flat. And I think we're realizing that more and more and more over time. The book's 25 years old, but reality is that we're seeing that every day. It's becoming less curved and more flat, and everybody is connected. And I think, that's a wonderful thing. So I think public education, because not everybody or very few people can afford, private schools and, kind of an answer that's just works for a handful of people relatively. So that's always been very important to my family and my children as well. And they're very actively involved in that arena. So those are some of the things. We do a lot of work in areas of culture because we think culture is another way. There's a lot of times there's too much of an emphasis, in my opinion, on book learning and what have you. And some people learn differently. They learn by expressing themselves through yoga, through arts, through athletics, through whatever it may be, music, drama. And so I think you have to let people kind of find themselves in those ways as well. Sadly, within the public education area, a lot of those opportunities for expression have been cut back and eliminated. So we'd like to see more of that expanded over time because I think it's very healthy for everybody.
Yeah, I love that how you've chosen 3 things that encourage so much internal growth.
Right.
Like I feel like your investment in parks and green spaces is about people finding internal calm.
Right.
And even this week, we've had all these incredible outdoor activities that you've arranged and the team's arranged here for everyone to partake in. And we've seen how people are bonding closer when they're out and about in green spaces and outdoors and going on these beautiful walks and riding or whatever else it may be.
Right.
And especially what you're speaking about, the education system, of course. And then I think you're spot on when you talk about how arts and the arts allow us to express ourselves more effectively and how that's never always encouraged.
Right.
And so your investment in that space, I'm sure, has made a big
I think,
difference.
as you know, and many of our guests know that, that education, the book education is very important. The life education is in many cases even more important than exposure and what have you. It's one of the reasons our foundation has just started to invest on an international basis. We're doing work in Africa, doing work in the Caribbean, et cetera. But one of the reasons is not because, we don't have enough opportunities within the United States. We do, and needs we do. But I wanted to send an important message, to our family and to our associates is that, not just talking about, humankind being connected,